Thank you for tuning in to the Ultimate Coach podcast, a companion to the transformative book, The Ultimate Coach, written by Amy Hardison and Alan D. Thompson. Each conversation is designed to be a powerful wake-up call, reminding us of what's possible for you and your life. So if you're on a journey to expand your state of being, this podcast is for you. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Ultimate Coach podcast. I'm Meredith Bell, your host for this episode, and I am delighted to welcome as my guest today, Rebecca Shannon. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Meredith. It's so wonderful to be here with you.
I am really looking forward to our conversation. And as a brief introduction, I want to tell our listeners that Rebecca's presence in the world creates vibrant, hot pink ripples, reflecting her love and light. She embodies a unique blend of empathy and empowerment in her life and in her coaching. She is known as Source's Pink Angel and the Queen of Heart-Led Leadership. So, Rebecca, with that brief intro, I would love for you to just share a little bit about your journey to the work you're doing today. And then, of course, I've got to ask you about those two names that you acquired over time.
Yeah, thank you. What a lovely introduction. Thank you, Meredith. And yeah, both names have been acquired as part of my journey. And Source's Pink Angel, if we start there, was a co-creation with Steve Hardison when I was in Phoenix, Arizona with him for my Be With session. And we were working on my declaration, my document, and that we started playing around with ideas. And it was like Steve's Angel, and he'd noticed that I really love pink. I'm normally dressed in pink. I've gone with blue. Meredith and I have matched up today with our blue. And we were just sort of were playing with it. And then we settled on through our conversation, Source's Pink Angel. And it's that is now the first line of my declaration, of my document. And it's, become my name that I use and people know me as. And being with Steve Hardison is part of the journey of why I'm here talking to you today, of course. And then Queen of Heart-Led Leadership really came about in a really lovely way, actually, because it was just someone put a comment on a post that I'd shared. And I'd been playing around with sort of, how do I sum up what it is that I do, particularly in this sort of more corporate world where I do some work as well. Source's Pink Angel can confuse people sometimes when you put that out. So I tend to use that more personally. And someone just put a really lovely comment on a post and just said, Rebecca is the Queen of Heart-Led Leadership. And then several other people kind of commented with like, yes, she is. That's exactly who she is. And it landed a bit like when Steve and I created Source's Pink Angel. It just landed. It was like, yeah, that is who I am. So yeah, they both come about really beautifully, actually. And I'm very honored to have those names and to share them with people.
They really are great. Well, the Queen of Heart-Led Leadership, that to me has a somewhat self-explanatory, meaning. But Source's Pink Angel, I would love for you to share, since it's the very first line of your declaration about who you are, what does that mean to you in terms of who you are as Source's Pink Angel?
Yeah. So, the first thing I'll say there is it is who I am. It's who I have always been and had lost contact with or had lost connection with. So, and what I mean by that is that when I showed up with Steve in his office, I had a lot of other stories going on, a lot of other names that I would use about myself, words that I would use about myself. And in doing the work with Steve, he was always calling me forward into, but who are you really? And not who could you be, but who are you if you get beyond those names that you've come up with for yourself or those words that you use about yourself. And as I say, it started with you're my pink angel. Steve says you're my pink angel, and because I am, and my branding's pink, I wear a lot of pink. I showed up in pink to Steve's session, and actually so did he. he was gorgeously dressed as always, but had actually chosen very carefully pink jacket and the shirt that had pink in it. So he's, when we were sort of talking through some of the stories that I have that aren't very helpful, that weren't very kind about myself, which is where a lot of us start with the work around the document and the declaration, he was like, well, I see you as an angel. I see you as a pink angel. You're my pink angel. And then that sort of went to, but you can't just be mine. Your divinity, you're infinite, you're everything. You are everything. And because every time we were talking about my declaration, it was, and what more could be true? And what more? And Steve would just very gently, call me forward. And there was something that happened, Meredith, when he said it, that just landed. So when you say, what does it mean to me? It's like, it was like a homecoming. It was like, of course, that's who I am. And it's been one of those, so source to me means my connection with something bigger than. So, my higher self, the universe, God, whatever. And the definition isn't important to me, really. It's just that there's something bigger than me out there that I am connected to and I am part of. But also that real, for me, it means that real source inside me, like that, it's coming from within, and I am the source of that. And yes, I'm connected to the universe, to God, to higher self, but it's really that it's coming from within. So the source is within. And then pink is me. It's pink. An angel, it was just so nice to have something that felt so light and that someone else saw me that way. I think that was the other thing, someone else seeing me as an angel. And when Steve said it and we started playing around with it, I was like, yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that many times in my life, but I hadn't been able to own it and claim it and be it. So yeah, it took me a little while because I think people do have their own interpretations of what any of those things might mean. And then, it's like most things in life, I practiced, I said it more and more, and I was talking to people and people loved it. And, and people were like, yeah, that's who you are. And that for me then had me see myself that way as well.
I just love what you've shared. As I was listening to you, I almost got chills thinking about what it must have meant to you to really get at the core of your essence. Because I think that's one of Steve's real gifts, is helping people reveal to themselves who they really are. And it sounds like you really embraced that. You discovered that and embraced that. And so now I can truly understand it being a part of your document and what it means to you to say that. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And to me, it's also an invitation to each one of us to ask that question that he asked you. Who are you really? And getting past the negatives or the superficial things that we may have said about ourselves to get to the real essence of who we are. Well, Rebecca, one of the things that drew me to you were posts and comments that you had put on Facebook that I feel I was drawn to and led to. And one of those was, I think it was in response to a post that either Gary or Ankush had posted about upgrading. And you just had a beautiful statement in there about upgrading yourself and more recently a room. And I think there's so much for us to unpack there. Talk about your own recent discoveries around this whole idea of upgrading ourselves and upgrading everything in our lives.
Yeah. And it's resonated with so many people. As you said, you were drawn to that comment and several other people were. And I think it was something that has been very present for me over the last couple of years, and yet I hadn't kind of said it in that way. And of course, when you say it a certain way, suddenly it sparks things for other people. And I think it was Ankush who shared something about it, and that obviously called me forward. I mean, going back to creating the declaration, becoming Source's Pink Angel, that was my first experience of a really, really powerful upgrade. That happened over the space of a couple of hours, and it felt like an upgrade. Like, I'd gone in at this level and come out up here. And the great thing about that for me is that nothing had changed there. My life hadn't changed. Nothing had actually fundamentally changed, and everything had changed within that upgrade from who I was being. And so from that point, and actually going over and creating the experience with Steve and committing to going, I live in the UK, so going over to America was a big, commitment in terms of investment and time. But that in itself was my first creation around an upgrade. It's like, I read something in the book that called me forward, in the Ultimate Coach book, and something called me forward. And my first reaction was very much like, yeah, that's not for me though, is it? And then there was this question that came in that was from that pure essence that we were talking about of, well, why not you? Why not? And that has become, and over the work that I've done with Steve and with other coaches and with my own work with my clients, has become like well, where else can I upgrade my life? And how do I create that? And obviously Steve is a powerful creator. He's always looking for ways to create, and whether it's an upgrade or create something new, something from nothing, he lives that. So, being in his world, I could see him doing that. I've also done a lot of work with Devin Banderson, who worked with Steve as well. So I see him in the same way, as always creating and seeing possibility, whether it's solving a problem or upgrading. So I just started showing up in life with this idea of, okay, well, how do I make this the very best experience that I can? How do I, if I'm going to stay at a hotel, as was the example that I used, was this is going to be the very best stay at this hotel. This is going to be the greatest stay I've ever had at a hotel. They're going to be the best staff. It's going to be the best meal. It's going to be the best experience I have. And because I had that idea as I showed up, I started to notice that I was getting upgrades. I was getting upgraded in rooms because I was showing up, and not in an arrogant way, not in a demanding that, do you know who I am and I need an upgrade or anything like that, just because of how I was consciously creating myself. And sometimes it would happen naturally, and I'd go to check in and I'd be, pleased to be there. I'd be, conversing with people as I arrived, smiling, how I was showing up in the world. And then they'd just say, oh, and you've been upgraded, complimentary upgrade. And other times I might ask. So I might say, oh, you know what? Last time I stayed here, I had the most beautiful room. Is that available today? And then they'd have a look and they'd say, yeah, actually that is, and we'll upgrade you to that room. So I started to just notice that, and as we know in this world, around who we're being creates our world. So if I'm showing up, and the magic I think here is it's not an expectation. So I'd already decided that this was going to be the most beautiful stay at this hotel. I was already creating it that way. And then the upgrade happens. It's not an expectation. It's a wonderful creation from who I'm being. If I hadn't got the upgrade, which has happened as well, then it's like amazing. And then I get to the room that I was get to, and rather go in with that energy of I didn't get the upgrade, this room isn't any good, I'd go in with, oh my gosh, this room is perfect. It's so cozy. It's got a great view, and find the things that meant I still had an upgraded experience. So that's I think, speaking to what you saw and what I see, and I don't use the word try. I am that, and being that in my life. And it can be very simple things, making a cup of tea at home. How do I make that a more, upgraded experience? Well, you know what? I use the best cup, and I get my little lovely teacup that I've got, my teapot that I use for making tea. I put it on a nice tray. I treat myself to really nice tea bags from Fortnum & Mason's in London. There are ways that we can bring that idea of upgrading into into everyday moments in our life.
Such great examples. And, I love what you said about letting go of expectations, so we don't have disappointment associated with whatever the outcome is. I love your gratitude, because I think that's a key aspect of being able to upgrade our thinking and our response to situations that happen to us is going into it with an attitude of gratitude, no matter what happens as the outcome. I think that's an element of upgrading, is growing into the attitude of it's all a gift. It's all good.
Yeah.
Just giving ourselves permission to think about what represents an upgrade for me in this moment, whether it's an upgrading of my thinking, upgrading of the actual experience that I might have. To me, that is worth pausing, reflecting, and pondering, how can I upgrade this area of my life? So we don't feel overwhelmed about upgrading everything, but where am I settling for less than I deserve?
Yeah. And that was very much so when I talk about this now, this is present. That's not how it's always been, and I can find many examples where I didn't show up for something because I didn't think I was worth deserving. There are times where I know that I showed up and I had expectations that came from a place of, ego, and I was disappointed. And then guess what happened? The whole experience is ruined because I'm coming from a place of disappointment for something that was never there in the first place. So, this is a shift, because I know people listening, what people are interested in is where we've moved from and to in terms of how and who we're being. So this hasn't always been my experience, and it still is a practice in my. Certainly starts with my being. It starts with my thinking. It starts with my doing, and the harder practice for me really is around the smaller things at all areas of life. What I noticed was, though, that when I started seeing it in certain areas, then my awareness was switched on, and I was like, oh, okay, well, if I can create it here, then I can create it here as well. So the ripples, talk about, hot pink ripples that sparkle and shine, they happen for me as well. It's like I see it happening here, and it's like, okay, where else could I bring that in? And how else could I bring that to other people as well? So, if I'm living in an upgraded way of being, what's the ripple effect of that of people around me? Because, I'm in gratitude, I'm switched on, I'm lit up, I'm enjoying, I'm not living in disappointment or lack, expectations. So guess what? Everyone around me gets a greater experience. So they get an upgrade as well. And that, we talk a lot about the ripple effect and the butterfly effect and how that changes the world. So this upgrade that we talk about, where we talk about it for ourselves, by upgrading your life, you are automatically having a very positive impact on the whole world, all of us, because we know that one little action here, that one little upgrade here has that ripple effect out in the world.
Makes me think about your work with your clients, that you are a coach. I'm sure now that you become more conscious of this whole ability for us to choose to upgrade, how do you help a client raise their awareness about the opportunities they have? I guess another interesting thing to explore with you is, what are some of the gaps you see people having between where they could upgrade to and where they are currently? Where is the gap in either their thinking or way of being?
Yeah. Well, I think what I see, and I saw it in myself and therefore I see it in other people, is I see that we have learned to be smaller than we are. So rather than being a gap necessarily, there's that we've just learned to not shine brightly, to feel like that if we shine brightly, it's taking it away from somebody else. And, a lot of the work that I do with my clients is around the foundational work that has them then be able to see how they can show up more in their own lives. So, where we're not showing up in our full potential, in our full light, where we've learned that we believe that life is finite, that if we have more of the pie, somebody else is having less of the pie. So once we start doing that kind of work, like moving people away from that idea of, if I shine brightly, I'm taking away from somebody else. If I shine brightly, it's not safe. If I shine brightly, people aren't going to like me. If I shine brightly, I might fail. They're the sort of things that we've been working on to build up their greatness again, so because we've all become, we can become very small. And then we start looking at areas of their life, as you say, all these different areas of like, okay, well, if we now have a different way of being with our greatness, with our light, with how we shine in the world, where are the areas, like you said, that without becoming overwhelmed by it, that we could just step up a little bit more? Could we show up a little bit more? And again, what I do with clients is look for those, like low-hanging fruit. Where's an area where you can see this quite easily? And let's play there for a bit. Let's go and have some fun there and see what's possible. And then once we get some evidence, because of course the learned behavior of I'll keep myself small, I won't shine brightly, will keep me safe. We've got loads of evidence that backs that up, because that's all we've ever experienced. So of course we've got loads of evidence. So what we want to do is start creating a new evidence pathway for people. So they start seeing that, actually, when I show up here, look what happens, new possibilities come, new opportunities, I'm having more fun, I feel better, people notice me, whatever it might be. So they get a new evidence pathway. And then it's like, okay, so what would that look like if you took that into your business? Or what would it be like if you took that into your relationships? Or what would it be like if you took that into something you've always wanted to do? And for me, those were things like singing, writing, doing things that I loved. That started opening up new possibilities for me, because I could see that it was okay, it was safe, it was fun, it was joyful. And again, the ripple effects were that it showed up elsewhere in my life. So I do think there's some fundamental work around those stories that we hold about ourselves, the ones that limit us and keep us small. And then there's the, where we can see areas that we could quite easily move into and show up differently. And going back to my work with Steve, where a lot of this has come from, and there was a lot of work before there that got me there and a lot of work afterwards. But, one of my favorite quotes is the Marianne Williamson quote about our biggest fear is not that we'll fail, but it's that we'll succeed, and that we have learned that if we shine brightly, we take it away from somewhere else. And actually the quote speaks to, when we shine, it actually gives other people permission to shine. So by really owning our own greatness, which was part of the decision to go and work with Steve. That was a decision to step into my greatness rather than my old story, which would have been, who are you to go?
Just love the different points that you've brought up, especially as you were describing your work with clients. And some of the things that really landed for me was this idea of playing with it and making it fun. And so there's a lightness to it. A lot of times I think when we imagine making a change, it feels a little scary. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? We take it, I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I take myself too seriously. And so the idea of failing or succeeding can do a number on stories that I might tell myself before I just go ahead and jump in. Framing it as something to play with and having fun with it has such a different feel to it. It's not scary. It's not intimidating. It's, let's try it. Let's see how this works when I do that. And I like the distinction of taking small steps versus a gap. Because again, as I think back on my use of the word gap, it implies a lack, or even a leap that I have to make from one place to another, instead of moving into something in a manner that allows me to build that evidence that then gives me the momentum to continue play and trying new things.
Yeah, I found the words play and experiment and, do have this, element that is lighter and, working with clients. One of the things that sometimes clients will feed back to me is, I just feel so much lighter after our session, which is wonderful feedback. And then but actually what I started noticing was when I looked at it, we hadn't stripped we had stripped things away, but what I mean is they still were going away with some new things to be and do and try, and yet they felt lighter. Because as you say, we can all take ourselves too seriously. I can, and I'm less so now, but I still can. And there are elements of my life that I'll take more seriously than other elements of my life. So yes, this lightness that we can bring to life. And as you say, sometimes it's like, it's easier to step someone into that in one area, so that they can play here where they're not giving themselves permission to play somewhere else in their life. And then what happens is really they get to see that when they play, they get amazing results. They get different outcomes. They enjoy life more. Life gets easier, more graceful. They've then got the confidence to try it out somewhere else as well. And I love doing that work with clients, and you see people light up suddenly about something that was quite heavy or scary or overwhelming, suddenly just feels lighter and fun.
Yes. Well, and Rebecca, there was another area tying in to me with upgrading that actually can impact our upgrades of ourselves. And that's this concept of acknowledgement, not just a concept, but a practice of acknowledgement. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about your awareness growing of what does acknowledgement mean when you receive it, as well as when you give acknowledgements.
Yeah, this is really, really present for me right now around acknowledgements. And again, we've mentioned him once today already, but Ankush was a very big part of that for me and really brought it into a practice. My awareness around acknowledgements, receiving and giving, has been on a trajectory which, if you'd said to me a few years ago, I'm not sure I'd even know what an acknowledgement was. And I certainly wasn't hearing it very often or giving them very often. So, I was already on that trajectory of receiving much, acknowledgements much better from other people. And really, I noticed that I was very good at giving acknowledgements. That's one of the things that people will reflect back to me. You're very good at acknowledging people. You're very good at, name dropping people in a good way. When people have worked, people have supported you where other people might not mention the people behind the scenes or people that have supported you. You are one of the people who will bring those people into the conversation and really acknowledge them. Ankush, though, this last month, I think it was, ran some being sessions in the being community around acknowledgements. So he ran a series of sessions, listening, acknowledgements, being and service, or being your word, I think. And the acknowledgements one I watched, and it really, really landed with me. And it brought, as often happens when we're playing and experimented, it brings exactly what we need at exactly the moment that we need it. And I listened to the masterclass or the webinar, which was incredible. And I think Ankush is one of the most powerful coaches that we have in this community. And I've seen him grow, over the last 2 years with his work with Steve. And this practice that he was sharing came from his work with Steve, which was, go away and fill a whole lined legal pad of acknowledgements for yourself. So that was the practice from it. There's much more in the masterclass, but that essentially was it. It was like, we're so good at, beating ourselves up. And as you said earlier, and you caught it, where's the gap? Where am I not doing what I should be doing or could be doing or, want to do? We focus on that. How about if we just took a really intensive look at how we could acknowledge ourselves for everything we have been and done? And in the work that I did with Steve when I was with him, that was very much where a lot of my declarations came from. He was like, well, how about we look at what you were doing then and who you were being and acknowledge yourself for that. But when Ankush did the masterclass, it really brought it into a very, very defined, intensive and intentional practice. And so because I'm an inaction kind of girl, I started, for myself. I was like, right, I'm gonna practice this, and I still am. I'm still working my way through my pad. I'm doing it at least twice a day, where I go to it and spend at least an hour writing out all my acknowledgements for myself. And because I like to spread hot pink ripples in the world, I created my own masterclass and I brought it to my community and my clients. Because again, that's what I see. That's how we create change in the world, right? It's, and again, comes back to this really underlying thing that I have around it, scarcity mindset has shifted so much for me into this, there's no competition. Ankush is sharing from a generous place that he's, got from, and my role in this is to then share it on to other people. And I, made a commitment that I would share it with as many people as I could, and knowing that they would share it with other people. And so I have a community around me at the moment who are all in that practice. And, I'll get messages that, I've done 1,100 acknowledgements. I counted up how many I've done. And the shift in that for people, Meredith, has just been, seeing it myself in myself and seeing it with people around me is one of the most transformational things I've seen. And people who, if you'd said to them at the beginning of that process, you're going to sit and write a whole pad full of acknowledgements for yourself, their first reaction was, I don't think I could even come up with 3. And suddenly they've got pages and pages and pages of them. And that has been, I think, is a real gift, from Steve, from Ankush, from me to other people. It's such a powerful practice. And what it's opening up, and I'm seeing it not just for myself, but people around me, because they're not just my clients, they're people in my world, friends, family, is, oh my gosh, the upgrade is happening in that, because we're acknowledging ourselves. So we're showing up more as ourselves. We're showing up in a way that's, we literally, I'm doing it as I'm saying it, we're kind of stepping up into our greatness again. There's less of this sort of, here's all the things I'm not doing. It's like, yeah, but look at all the things I have done, and then I'm seeing them do it with other people, I'm really seeing people be that, they're pausing and acknowledging themselves. They're catching themselves. I use the word catching quite a lot with our words and things like this. They're catching themselves and they're like, I acknowledge myself for. And so it's so powerful. And then also it's a great practice of being able to receive it, because, and I'm sure you see this as well, again, we in our smallness, we're not always very good at receiving acknowledgements, and we back them away and we don't land them. And the bad stuff gets in and the good stuff just kind of gets bounced off. And that was certainly true for me. And by allowing those acknowledgements to flow, this is how I see wealth, this is how I see love, when we allow it to flow in and out and receive it and give it, then we create this beautiful flow of acknowledgements. And, what better way to show up in the world, to be fully acknowledging of ourselves and other people.
Yes. And, as I was listening to you describe that, we might all want to take on that very practice of filling up a legal pad. I remember Ankush sharing that, and I did several pages and I never went back to it. So you've just reminded me of the importance of doing that. What I have done that I would encourage folks to do in terms of receiving acknowledgements is when somebody on social media gives positive feedback to you or acknowledges you for something, take a screen capture of that and put it into a document. In fact, I have all of those below my own document. So all my declarations are there. And then below that are these various acknowledgements that I've received. And that is so powerful because it reminds us of who we really are, because people are seeing these positive things in us and reflecting them back to us. And so owning those, and some of those very statements have become my own declarations because I have accepted them and seen the power of that individual to see the real me, to see my real greatness. And I think that if we can develop the habit of graciously receiving those when somebody does acknowledge us, either verbally or in writing, and capturing that to remind us when we have those moments of self-doubt or, an experience that was not as favorable as we would have hoped, to be able to look at, this is the real me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, Ankush talks about it in his, you mentioned there, graciously receiving. I think, one of the things is how we receive those is also, yes, I love what you're showing there about, saving them, keeping them, because that is, our true self and how we're being seen in the world. And if other people can see us that way, then that helps us see ourselves that way. But also it's lovely to acknowledge the person who's acknowledged you, but in a very, what we can sometimes do is we can do that, but we diminish ourselves in the process. And I think Kush shared this example as well. And it really resonated with me as a coach is, a client will message you and say, and they might not use the words I acknowledge you for, but they'll say something like, oh my gosh, our work together is changing my life. Right? So you get this amazing message from this person. And the first thing you say is, it's all you. It's all you. Right? Because as a coach, obviously we are bringing out, our role is to bring out the best in people. We're not doing it. They're doing the work. They're shifting their thinking. They're shifting who they're being. And what Kush pointed us to, and I believe that Steve pointed Kush to it, is it's a co-creation. It's very easy to be so keen to acknowledge the other person for doing all the work that you take yourself out of it. And that's the other thing that happens with this. That you're shining, so I can't shine. So actually learning to really receive that acknowledgement. So if someone acknowledges you on Facebook or makes a comment or something, is to really acknowledge it, receive it, and I love the word and, it's one of the most powerful words in the dictionary, and then acknowledge that person back. Thank you so much for noticing. Thank you for sharing with me the difference that our work is having in your life. It's a co-creation. We make a great team. I love working with you. I love how you show up. So, and look at the richness that's then created from receiving that, rather than just batting it straight back to the other person. And this again is all the nuances and the richness in being and creating. We've suddenly created something so much more than.
Yes. And inadvertently, if we respond by saying it's all you, that sort of puts the burden on that person. Oh my gosh, I've got to perform. It's sending a message that's unintentional about I had nothing to do with it. So you're right. It does cause us, and that can be for so many areas. Coaching is one. There are so many places where we are co-creating with others, and we tend to diminish ourselves and our role in that. And I like focusing on that word co-creation so that we recognize our part in that happening. It didn't just happen by accident. It was intentional and was something that we both contributed to. So I think that's such a good perspective in the relationships we form, the projects we take on, where we're working in a team. There's so many areas.
Yeah. One example that I'd love to share there, and it came to me, I didn't come with this example, it just came to me as you were talking then, was obviously we've had the Olympics happening recently. And there was and I don't know all the names and I don't know what the competition was, but there was a beautiful moment on the podium where I think it was Simone Biles and the other American lady whose name escapes me. I apologize for not knowing their names, but somebody else had won the gold. And so they'd gone off and received their silver and their bronze. And then when this girl stepped up to get the gold, they had this conversation where I think we should bow to, I think we should acknowledge her essentially. And there was this beautiful moment where you had the lady stepping up onto gold and these two beautiful, smiling, lit up women acknowledging her as well. And guess what happened in that moment? Nobody was shining less. But the picture that was created by all of them being in that was amplified. It didn't take away from what they'd achieved. And obviously they've both gone on and achieved amazing things on their own as well. But it just lit up the whole. And for me, I remember watching it and just feeling like this whole, like something so much bigger was created. And the look on the girl's face who stepped up to take her gold, it's almost like the gold was great, but these girls bowing down in acknowledgement to her just took it to a whole other level. And I know there were lots of other examples of that in the Olympics as well. The Olympics has been a fantastic example of how everyone can shine brightly, that we don't take away from other people. There was another great one with a Chinese weightlifter, a young woman, and she went and got her coach and lifted him up in celebration. Because again, you know, it's a co-creation. Her coach and her have been working together to create what made it possible for her to, I don't know whether it was a gold or what she'd won there, but she recognized it was a co-creation and she wanted him to be a part of it. And guess what happened? That became a moment that was captured on camera because it was so amazing. Because how often do we not do that? And how often do we see examples in the world where people don't acknowledge other people that are working with them? You know, and that's like you say, in teams, in leadership, in sports, in life, in coaching relationships. It amplifies, it doesn't dim anyone's light.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up the examples because you're right. The Olympics, the example that you just described, that picture was just priceless. And there were so many other moments. And the takeaway from listening to you is, where could we notice that we might be withholding acknowledgement of someone else for fear of what you were saying earlier about there's this scarcity. So if we give too much to someone else, it somehow takes away from us. And noticing when we might hold back and think about, what's my reason for not speaking up, and giving this person the acknowledgement. And I think if we look at the stories we tell ourselves in those moments, I don't want to get a swelled head. I don't want them to, you know, think they're the best things in sliced. I mean, there's so many different things that we can rationalize in our mind in a split second that prevents us from being generous with others. And so that practice of acknowledging and receiving the acknowledgements and looking at it as a co-creation, all of those I think are just so important to how we show up. And it's all a part of that upgrading that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up something from what you shared just then, which is another practice, if you like, that's helpful for this. I mean, the acknowledgements one, go and watch Ankush's masterclass. Find me and I'll share mine with you if you want. But certainly, you know, anyone listening, I would highly recommend it. It's such an incredible practice, and to do it quite intentionally and intensively intensifies it for you. But something you just mentioned there with these stories that we have, and these little cliches and, you know, sound bites that we have. One of the things that I do with my clients, coming back to how do I get them to think about how they upgrade and how they show up, is also to really get those down on paper. Like, you know, I'll do it around time. What are our time stories? What are the little stories we have around time? You know, the ones around wealth are another one. You know, we have so many stories about, you know, what we deserve, what we don't deserve. Money's evil. Money's, you know, people who have got money aren't happy. People who've got money are the only people who are happy. You know, there and some of the things you said there about, you know, don't shine so brightly, don't have a big head. You know, nobody likes someone who blows their own trumpet. You know, all of these are these little, I think JP Morgan calls them hiccups and burps, right? That we have in our, and they're insidious. They seem so harmless, and yet they're insidious in terms of how we show up in the world. So one of the things that I do with my clients is we get those stories out. It's like, right, dump them all down. What are all these things? What did your mum say to you about money? What did your dad say to you about money? What are your peers saying to you about money? Or wealth or love or anything. And let's just get them down, and then let's just have a look at them. Because if we can, you know, it's like anything, if we've got awareness of it, we can now have a look at that. And this is the work that Steve does, from going from our judgments to our declarations. So let's just have a look at them and go, is that really true? You know, and is it helpful? And if that wasn't true, what else might be more true? And would that be more helpful? And suddenly you can very easily get someone from all these like hidden stories that are playing out on like repeat. Actually, they now become the very thing that has them show up differently. And that, I think, is another part of the work that I've done for myself and that I do with clients, which is so transformational for people. because they're insidious and they're just here. And we just need to bring them out into the light, shine a light on them. And then what else might be true here?
I love that. Thank you for mapping that out, because I think anyone can do that, whether they're working with a coach or not. There's a process you can follow that can be really valuable for you. Rebecca, I've got to make a few minutes here for this one final thing that I also had seen you write about, and I think you even did a video about it. And this is when you had wanted to create a coaching session for your son with Steve. And it happened like magic. And I think it would be just a wonderful way to wrap up our conversation on co-creating a very special moment.
Yeah, and this is a really great thing about co-creating is, we are part of this infinite consciousness of the universe. And so co-creation happens with other people, but it also happens with, the magic that exists in life. And I talk about magic and miracles a lot as well. So yeah, I was having a conversation from one of the Connection Bingo calls within the community with Mike Costis, I think is how you pronounce his name. I think you taught me how to pronounce his name. So Mike Costis. And we were talking about the event in Arizona next year with Judy and Judy Thelson's organizing. And he was asking if I was going to be coming. And I was like, do you know what? I don't know yet. I'd love to be there. I would love to create for my sons, a coaching session with Steve. I'd love to see if I could create a Being With session with Steve and take my sons and take them to Arizona and go to the Grand Canyon, all the things that I did while I was there. And we just, we sort of ended our call with this, well, we've planted some seeds of possibility here, and it was a lovely call anyway, but that was sort of one of the outcomes. So, and I did nothing, right? I didn't do anything. I had that conversation, seeds were planted, co-creation was going on. The next day, literally 24 hours later, I was picking my son up. It was his last day of his primary school, so his year in the UK. And I literally had him for like 15 minutes in the car because I had to pick him up and then take him back for his school disco. So 15 minutes window of me being with my son, Patrick, at that time. And as we were pulling up outside the house, the phone goes and it's Steve Hardison. So between having this conversation with Mike the day before and this, I hadn't messaged Steve and said, I'm thinking about creating I said, I'd done literally nothing. Steve had seen something that I'd been posting, something, or he'd seen, he's the ultimate time warrior because how he finds time to do all the things he does is incredible. So he'd watched something or I'd seen something I'd sent him or whatever. But I hadn't deliberately done anything for this. And so he always begins with, hi, Rebecca, do you have time to talk? And I was like, yes, I do. I said, and actually, Steve, my youngest son is in the car, Patrick. And I realized that, and they had a 15, 20-minute conversation. And, and it was beautiful to hear them conversing and talking. And my son was going to an event with Devon Banderson a week later, which is a whole other story we don't have time for today. So Steve, we talked about that, and Patrick had a message from Steve to Devon to deliver. So he became part of another creation. And then he had delivered a message back to Steve from Devon. And it was only, it was a beautiful moment. I was enjoying it in the moment. And then it was sort of afterwards, I dropped him back to his disco and I came home and I was like, wow, that's how you co-create. Because just from planting that little seed, within 24 hours, my son was talking to Steve and they had a conversation and Steve was, inviting him into possibility. And there was so much else created from that. Steve, because he's always creating, he was co-creating ideas in Patrick's head about lots of different things that I know will have ripple effects in the future. And for me was another example, as you say, of how we get to co-create in this world, just by showing up, just by being who we are. That's how that co-creation came about. And Meredith, I could fill another hour full of other magic and miracles that have been created from who I'm showing up to be in the world, as I'm sure you could, because this is not just a story about me. It's the other thing that Steve has really invited me into is when I'm sharing, it's not just a cool story about me and my son and a call with Steve or any of those other things. It's a story about you, because we could all find those incredible, magical miracles, co-creations, if we're willing to seek them.
So true. Just love that. And you know what is so powerful? I know J.P. Morgan talks about this too, speaking your world into existence. This conversation that you and Mike had, where you spoke about possibilities and about what you would like to see. Again, I think sometimes in our playing small, we don't even dare to speak some of the things we really want to see happen. And if we can begin the practice of doing that, then it's more likely those are going to show up in our lives. Rebecca, this has just been such a fantastic conversation. There are so many things that you've said that I would like to invite my listeners to go back and listen to again about you. As you say, each one of these topics that we've touched on has such relevance for each one of us to think about it in different parts of our lives, in different ways that we're being. How can we upgrade our thinking, our thoughts, our behavior, and how we show up? And also this whole area of acknowledging, especially with ourselves, because I think the more we can be generous with ourselves, the easier it is to be generous with others. It just goes hand in hand. So I want to acknowledge you for everything you've shared today, Rebecca, and who you're being in the world. I just love that you are Source's Pink Angel and all the other ways that you bring light and love to folks in the world. Thank you for being with us today and being a part of this community.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really lovely to hear that. And I love what we've co-created here today. It's been beautiful being with you and everything you and the team do to bring these conversations to people so they can hear it for them. It's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. If there's someone you know who could benefit from this conversation, please share this episode with them. Also, check out our website, beingmovement.com. You'll find valuable resources and links to connect to an engaging and wonderfully supportive community. Together, we can inspire and support each other on the path to a greater understanding of being. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.